But today is a very special occasion, a somewhat sad occasion in some ways, but also a happy occasion, I'm sure, for the Warden as he goes on to follow his calling in the direction that the good Lord is calling him to take. And we're so happy for him. Then we are happy that he has been able to be with us here today. Now, we've got a bit of a program, so we're shortly going to hear from David Sansoni. And if Anand Amaranath, our patron, gets here on time, we'll have a welcome from him, but we'll fit him in somewhere along the line. Then the Warden himself is going to speak to us. And then we're going to have a Q&A, which the Warden has very kindly agreed to. And also after that, we'll probably have a vote of thanks from Milroy. And during all this, we're going to have dinner. So we're going to wing it a little bit. We'll probably have our...
I add my own welcome, if I may, to the Warden, Marc Billimoria, and to all Tomians gathered here. It's really a privilege, an extra privilege for me to be invited, to have been invited to say these few words in tribute. Warden Marc may not remember this or know it, but our association goes back quite a while. I dare say well over 25 years, when my sister's son, D.R. De Silva, was in your history class. And that's where we first began to learn of this erudite gentleman, much loved and respected, and then much loved and respected by the whole family. So that Warden Marc, as a support act for Roger Aldens, for example, the great pupil and friend of Reverend Roy Boyer, our choir master for many years, in designing a beautiful Lenten service that was hoped would become a tradition, just as the 9 lessons and carols are at Advent. And that it may yet eventuate in time. But through...
I must first apologize for not being here on time. Got caught in a lot of traffic on my way from the city. Having said that, it's a great pleasure to both welcome and also bid farewell to Reverend Marc Billimoria. Welcoming him because the last time I think he was here, that was a few years ago, and we were only hoping that he would be around for a long time, considering the fact that he's a man who's still quite young, and there's so much to give, both to the college and to society in general. I have a particular affinity towards Reverend get special preferences as opposed to another child who might be strictly academic. There's one other factor that I just want to dwell around. You see, the school motto talks about the school motto, when it says Esto Perpetua, and translated to English, it means be thou forever. People have given it different interpretations as to what really was the intention behind the motto being put in. I mean, this motto is not only used at St. Thomas's, but in Eton, and even in a state of Idaho in America. That's their motto, be thou forever.
For those who don't know me, I'm Iksa. Chitra knows my correct name. And as the day progresses, he knows correct name. By that we know how many days he has. Now, before I introduce Marc, Reverend Marc, I would like to read something which would interest you. And Ananda might know this gentleman, Justice E.F.N. Gresham. Do you know him? Yeah, of course. Yeah. Now, he passed away in 1973. He's an old Thomian, highly respected Thomian. He was Attorney General, right? And a Supreme Court judge, a distinguished Thomian, and he was educated at Oxford in 1925 and took his sales in 1946. So he was a gentleman who knew the ethos of St. Thomas's because he was a distinguished Thomian. Reverend Visaran described Gresham as an ideal Thomian who combined with effortless ease, brilliance, foundation for all you have achieved. Human relationships are complex. One has to work hard and walk the narrow path. Being a man of God, I see that you have done that exceedingly well, trusting in the deep faith you have and being guided by the greatest commandment of Jesus. You shall love the Lord your God with all your heart, with all your soul, and with all your mind. And you shall love your neighbor as yourself. Now it is my privilege and honor to invite you to speak to us. Before I do
Thank you, Iksa. Good evening, gentlemen. It's nice to be here, but this is a bit like singing for one's supper. I was never meant to be at St. Thomas's, even as a student, because my dad was a role prepite, went to Royal, and as it happened, both Prep and Royal rejected me, as did St. Peter's for that matter. And then, thanks to the good officers of people like Nihal's dad, Mr. Dayasabesinger and people like Lynn Dasanayaka, they spoke to the then warden, Mr. Langakot, and managed to get me into St. Thomas's. But it's been a wonderful journey, and being warden has been obviously the culmination of that journey. I'm not going to bore you with facts and figures about how the college is doing, because in this era of social media, you're all aware of it, because of the information that sometimes even precedes the warden's official communications. But beware that some of those communications may actually not contain facts. So it's always better to clarify and find out if you're not sure of some of the information that comes your way. Many of you have asked why I'm retiring. I'm not retired, still too young for that. I've just decided that it's time to move on to something different, but also something for which I stepped out of education in '99 to begin with. Because when I left teaching in 1999, it was to pursue work in the church as an ordained person. And I never thought in my wildest dreams that I would end up once more at St. Thomas's in a teaching capacity or even heading a school. In 2006, I had a life-changing experience because I had a bad heart attack and I had to stand down from work for a while. And then suddenly, out of the blue, the Bishop of Colombo at that time, in his wisdom, came to us and visited us and said, "Look, I think, you might be able to help me. I need a person to take over a school. And would you consider going to Gurutala?" Now, telling a person who's just recovered from a heart attack that he needed to go to a school that was almost closed because numbers had dropped, finances were in a mess, and so many problems were there. People must have thought that he was not quite there. But in his wisdom, he invited me to take up that challenge, and I must say there have been no regrets. That has been a situation that I would do again and again and again if I had those opportunities. Gurutalawa, if I may say, before I get on to Mount, is one of those very, very special places. And had I not been called to go back to Mount after my time there, I would have probably stayed on for a lot longer. And if I'm called to go back, who knows? That's a school that might still get me back. Because it's one of those schools that has such a lot to offer in terms of its location, its ethos. Dr. Heyman wanted a school very different to Mount. He didn't want a school where the boys were pampered. He wanted a school where the boys would do their own thing. The boys basically built that school. Even the squash courts and even the grounds were all done by the students under Dr. Heyman's rule. So it was a wonderful 4.5 years there. And then the next bishop, in his wisdom, having faced a crisis because both the warden and sub-warden decided to resign on the same day, unknown to each other, they couldn't find someone to take over. So he contacted me and said, "Would you come down to Colombo?" And it was a hard decision to leave Guru. I think the only thing that perhaps prompted us to take that decision, my wife and I, was that our daughter was in hostel in Colombo, and we thought, okay, it's time to get back together as a family after 4 years. And so if that hadn't been the case, probably we would never have left Guru. When coming to Mount as sub-warden under Indra D'Souza was quite a privilege. Indra was a wonderful warden. He was there for just 3 years, which is something which was regretted by us when he left. He would have really offered a very different perspective to the school because he brought with him the experience of a very modern system of education in Norway. And we were expecting a lot, but unfortunately his university didn't permit him to stay on. And suddenly, while I was at a conference in Jerusalem, I get a phone call from the bishop again. So bishops have always been playing an important role in my life. And there I was in Jerusalem at this conference, and the bishop calls me and says, I want you to go, I want you to consider becoming warden. And I said, hold on, give me a day, I need to think about this. So having spoken to a few people, my wife and a few others who have been advising me, I said okay to that. And that again is something I will not regret. I'm glad that I said yes. Now it's going to be end of 10 years this year. Why am I leaving? Why am I going? It's not because of any problems with the board. It's not because of any problems with the bishop, as some of the scurrilous WhatsApp messages of recent times have been alleging. I'm going because I want to. I have decided that 10 years is enough. In this day and age, you cannot stay in an office like the Warden of St. Thomas's for 26 years, as Canon Visaram did. It's not good for the institution, nor is it good for the person in that position. If you see a photograph of me when I took over in 2015 and you see me now, you will see very big differences. So it has taken its toll, and what I want to do next is to go back to the church full time and serve the church as I intended. Also to probably, if I get the opportunity, pursue some doctoral studies in one way that will also serve the church in the long term. So I'm leaving very happy, very content with what, under God and with the support of a wonderful team of associates at the school, I've been able to do. It's sometimes been difficult. The COVID years were very tough, but as you know, the Thomians have always come first in many things. We were the first to begin online classes when COVID hit. My current sub-warden, a brilliant man when it comes to IT, he within a week set up the online teaching facility, and we were online as fast as we could. Other schools came to us to seek our model. So COVID, we negotiated COVID. I remember taking a very faith-based decision when the board told me, now you're not going to have any sports, you've got to save your money, so sack all your coaches, because you can't afford to have coaches and have them around if you don't have sports. And I said, well, will you leave that decision to me? And I said, I'm going to keep them on, and I'm going to pay them full salaries, because at the end of the day, they too have families, they too have lives to sustain. And that was a faith-based decision that was not unrewarded, because at the end of COVID, not once had the school had to dip into its reserves, not once had we gone into overdraft, not once had we had a crisis in terms of having money for operations. And I think that was the reward for a faith-based decision. And those coaches stood with us subsequently. They worked with us for lower salaries than normal until things became easier. And that was because we stood by them when the time was tough. So COVID years taught us some lessons. It taught us to depend on faith. It taught us to lean on each other, support each other. The community around the world, including I'm sure members of your fraternity here, came in with a lot of support for students who were affected by COVID in terms of school fees. We were able to raise within the space of about 3 weeks or 4 or maybe a month, we were able to raise about 9 million rupees to sustain students who were finding it difficult because parents had found things difficult with the COVID situation and then with the economic crisis. So yeah, so it was a tough time, but a time that we learned a lot about ourselves, about how to run the school, and something about where the school came from and our roots as a school. We rediscovered what it was to be a school that was started in faith by Bishop Chapman, a school that moved to Mount Lavinia in faith under Warden Stone. Sometimes we forget Lavinia after relocating, but we weathered those storms and we've come through. Our academic results couldn't be better. We have, I think, almost all our A-level students are getting into universities today, whether it is in Sri Lanka or overseas. Many of them are coming here, and many of them are being welcomed by the fraternity here in Melbourne or Queensland or wherever. And of course, there are those who are topping their batches, getting into local faculties, which is very difficult. As you know, only 35,000 children every year get into local universities, even though 200,000 sit the A-levels. And of that 35, many are Thomians. Many get into medical. This year, I think we have a large number of students going into medical college. We have had children going into the engineering faculty at Katubantha. So our academics couldn't be better. Our extracurriculars are on a good even keel, right? They could be better, but we are facing challenges which other schools do not face, and that's something which our alumni sometimes don't realize. Our student base is sometimes much smaller than other schools. Some of the particular stances that we have taken as a school also disadvantage us. There's a school which is very similar to ours in ethos up in the hills that recently recruited 18 students, not less than 18 students from other schools for their senior rugby instructor. Right? And this is not an exaggeration. 18 students. At St. Thomas's, we will not have aggressive headhunting. We try to, as far as possible, develop our own talent within the school. But we do have an admissions policy where students who come to us after O-levels can come in, provided they have a sound academic background. Because that way it's something that we can help the boys to achieve, not just to come and play sports and go out into the world. We do not permit unnecessary supplementation. So that disadvantages us in a big way, because in many of the sports, unless you take supplements today, you don't have the, the physical structure to match on the field of sports. Like that, we've done a lot in terms of keeping boys in class. There is a school in Colombo, again compared to us, where the rugby team does not even attend classes during the season, because they are training from morning, evening and night, and we are supposed to compete with them when we send our boys to class from 7:30 to 1:30. So there are certain areas that we have not compromised on, and we are not ashamed to say that, but that disadvantages us. It means that we are not on a level playing field. And that sometimes is the price we pay for taking principled stances on certain things. So in terms of academics, we are good. We are on a good footing. In terms of extracurricular activities, we are on an even keel. We have 54 active clubs and societies in the school, 28 active sports in the school, some good administration structures in place, some excellent infrastructure. I don't think there's any other school in the country that provides the amount of infrastructure that we provide. Those of you who visited the college recently would have seen for yourselves the infrastructure we have in place. And that's not because of me, that's because we have a fantastic team at work. We have a fantastic team at work, a team that comes together, supports me from my sub-warden right down to all my teachers and staff. It's a superb team, and whatever has been achieved over the past 10 years has been achieved due to that team working with me and supporting me. But there's another aspect to this, and that's what I want to end with. I couldn't have done a lot had it not been for the support of people like you. The OBA in Sri Lanka has been a pillar of support, and we have moved thankfully away from the confrontational politics of the 90s. The OBA has been tremendous in their support over the last 10 years. And of course the chapters overseas of Adelaide as a OBA group. I've been able to give my blessings to Brisbane as they started their group, I think 2 or 3 years ago. I think even Perth started during the last 10 years. New Zealand started over the last 10 years. So did Qatar. And then in the US, we have 3 groups. In Canada, we have 2 groups. These old boys are the ones who make it possible for any warden to run the school. Because as you know, we don't get any financial support from the state, nor do we get any financial support from the church. We run our operations on fees, on school fees, our monthly operations, but everything else, whether it's a new classroom block or new equipment or smart boards or cricket equipment or rugby balls or whatever it is, it's you guys. Gentlemen like you around the world through your associations, and no warden with some brains up here would ever alienate himself from these associations. So as I conclude, I want to say that much of what I've been able to do has been because of your support in Sri Lanka and here. And I'm very grateful that the OBAs have been so supportive. And I hope that whoever takes my place will receive the same level of support and the same level of solidarity that I have experienced as a warden over the last 10 years. I would not have been able to do it without you, just as much as I wouldn't have been able to do anything without my team in Sri Lanka, without the old boys around the world, and I would say the majority of you have not given me headaches. Headaches have been there, I can tell you, but the majority have been very supportive, and I'm very grateful to you for that. Thank you also for this very gracious welcome. I mean, I never expected it to be this sort of an event. I just thought it's a get-together of a few Thomians just to have a good laugh, but I'm grateful for you having organized this event, to Exat for having coordinated things from that end, and for all of you for having made the time to be here. Thank you very much. and I hope and pray that my successor will be as blessed as I have been to have received such a lot of support and solidarity from you all. I want to end with words that you're all familiar with in this part of the world, but these are words that actually I've been saying to people recently. You'll recognize the origin of these words when I read them. I'm leaving because with such a privileged role comes responsibility. And I know that I no longer have enough in the tank to do it justice. It is just that simple. So thank you and God bless you and Esto Perpetua.
Victorious near and far, loudly let the echo ring for all we have and are. Esto perpetua, esto perpetua, esto perpetua, for the blue, black and blue forever.
So it's time for our mains. Planted Dorothy Dixon. Father, if I could ask, in terms of your guiding light, you mentioned your deep faith. How does this happen in practice, Father? Is it a sort of a daily meditation and a time of prayer and, you know?
I didn't expect that sort of question. I was wondering whether he's going to ask when are we going to win the Royal Tour.
Because it's such a stressful, anxious time in our community these days. How do you stay so centered?
I think you have to ask my wife that question. I'm a stresser. I stress quite a lot. And that's probably the reason I've lost my hair and all that. But somehow or other, I think the disciplines of the priesthood have helped. I don't think if I hadn't been a priest and had the disciplines of the priesthood of regular daily, prayer and sitting with the Word of God and all that I would have been able to do it. That has been very, very effective. That's not to say that lay people don't have that, but priests are trained for following a certain way of life, a rule of life. So I think it's that rule of life that sustained me. But by nature, I'm a warrior. But very often, in the worst of circumstances, worry didn't seem to come my way. So I suppose that's the grace of God.
Touch on a few things that you spoke about. I come from a different place because I'm very biased towards you because I grew up with your brother and so on. You kept me out of trouble for quite some time. Few things. One is, thank you for all that you've done. I know you're a modest man. You wouldn't probably call a lot of this out. But there was a time when we had 30% of students that couldn't pay school fees. But we're still a commercially viable operation, which is thanks to your stewardship. But I just want to call out a few things. I think not many people are aware that college has, as you pointed out, 29 sports. And it's all funded by college. Coaches, equipment, and everything. There's sports that we never even thought of. There's sailing at St. Thomas's. There's a whole heap of things, and the participation is excellent. The other thing that we have that even as late as my time, we didn't have academies. So St. Thomas's today has academies where during the off season, you don't have to go for private coaching and all of that. The school provides that. And the attendance, I understand, is quite encouraging.
We have 11 academies, so for 11 of the main sports. Cricket still gives the leadership, so we have about 300 boys turning up for cricket academy. This is under 11, mind you. Football comes a close second, taken over from rugby. Rugby is at that age not as popular perhaps. Parents are a bit more worried about other things. But then rugby, basketball, swimming, hockey, so altogether about 11 academies. We charge for those academies and we cover the cost of some of those academies through those charges. But otherwise, we provide all our sports facilities free. We don't charge a facilities fee for any of them. At the moment, we have 2 outdoor basketball courts, 4 outdoor tennis courts. We have a wonderful pool, 2 large fields, cricket fields. I don't know what it was. Rugby, you got to play 3 trophy matches and 2 tournament matches, irrespective of a victory or not. Doesn't matter how long you were on the field, you get your colors. So, for example, a boy may be on the field for 5 minutes of a game, but since he's been on the field, he gets his colors. That's cheapening colors.
Yeah.
Right? So we've been through a process over the last few years of re-looking at the colors criteria for all the colors awarding sports.
Right. In my day or time, I played rugby for St. Thomas's in the low grades, under 17 grade. We had a passion to play rugby. We were determined to represent the school, and we were also determined to get our colors. So it's basically we had to perform. So is there any changes how the teams are being selected there?
Well, I would say if you really want to play rugby, you come for rugby, because rugby is one of the toughest in terms of contact and all that.
Yeah.
And so you really want to play it if you want to come, if you turn out. But I think colors has also clouded a lot of guys' thinking. So they think, okay, I've got colors this year, right? I don't need to worry about next season. Even if I can play next season, I can do something else. So there is that.
Were never shut, and the school delivered a wholesome education to generations of Thomians. Teachers showed up to teach, as did students, all learning on the run. On your last visit to Sydney, you did address the OBA and explain to us that rather than trust social media, we should visit STC and see for ourselves the work that was being done at STC to keep flying the flag. You spoke about the challenges and the changes in education. As you stated, in the old days, teachers would enter a class with Marc books. Today they wheeled in a trolley and computers. That meant that every class had to be wired and provided with electricity, a monumental task at the time. Importantly, you also made mention about the efforts teachers.
Thanks, guys. Thank you. See you, Marc.